Using multipliers, you can earn up to more than double what the market does. In this episode, I am going to show you how some IUL owners earned 153% tax-free in 1 year using multipliers. Get ready. This is going to blow you away. You wouldn't believe how many financial advisors do not understand how to use a multiplier on an IUL policy, not only to earn maybe 60% returns in 1 year, but to be able to earn 153% like many people did in the year 2021. Get ready. So I'm Doug Andrew. I've been a financial strategist and retirement planning specialist now for more than 48 years. And I'm going to show you why my favorite financial instrument that allows people to prepare for long-term goals like retirement is a max-funded IUL, what I call a LASERFund, if it's structured correctly and funded properly. So I'm going to give you a few basics, and if this is going too fast for you, I would recommend you search on this channel for other episodes. I have over 730 educational videos, and as I go through this, if you can think of somebody who could benefit, be sure and share, click like, post a comment, but stay with me to the end. I want to gift you a copy of my most recent 300-page best-selling book called The LASERFund. So as a financial strategist, people usually come to me wanting to accumulate money safely at the most tax-advantaged method that they possibly can, rather than thinking deferring until they retire in a traditional IRA or 401k is going to work. They begin to realize they're not going to be in a lower tax bracket when they retire. Sometimes I have to show them that. So my favorite vehicle is a max-funded IUL. It's the brainchild of E.F. Hutton clear back in 1980. And back then, interest rates were high. And on my universal life policies from 1980 to 1990, I never earned less than 11.75%. I could earn 11 and net 10. And the 1% was not tax. That was the cost of the insurance that the IRS said had to be there in order for it to be tax-free. But in the 90s, the late 90s, interest rates started coming down, and so they came up with indexed universal life. And from that point forward, I was able to earn average returns of 9.62%, some years as high as 25%, and even 61%, and 153% in the year 2021. Now, you can search episodes on this channel to see these. And if it sounds too good to be true, it actually is true. So folks, when E.F. Hutton came up with this idea, they realized that in the Internal Revenue Code, for decades, back in 1980, under Section 72E of the Internal Revenue Code, your money accumulates tax-free inside of a life insurance policy. And back then, there was only whole life and term. And the rates of return were pretty pathetic, only 2.5% or 3.5%. So I would tell people just buy term and invest the difference. And I think you can earn 9 to 12%, pay the tax, and you'll outperform that. Well, E.F. Hutton said, what if we started to accredit people what the general account portfolio yield is with these insurance companies on their investments, AAA, AA bonds, mortgages on skyscrapers and shopping malls, and some stocks and so forth? Well, it was, 11 to 15%. And so it's tax-free. So this is why they realized under this section of the code, if you are earning interest in an insurance policy, it's tax-free. It's a sacred sort of tax-free cash cow in the Internal Revenue Code because you're taking pressure off of the government to provide for your retirement if you live, but if you die, the government doesn't have to take care of widows and orphans if you have an insurance policy. So 7702 is a section of the code that says if you withdraw the money the smart way, if you access money the smart way, your income will be tax-free, including all the gain. And when you ultimately do die, anything left in there will blossom, increase in value, and transfer income tax-free. But Hutton was using it as a living benefit primarily, as a death benefit on a secondary basis, okay? And so they introduced that, and then in 1982, under the Tax Equity Fiscal Responsibility Act, it spells the acronym TEFRA, and they didn't quite know what they were doing. Oftentimes the IRS doesn't understand, or Congress doesn't. And so they changed it 2 years later under the Deficit Reduction Act, DEFRA. TEFRA and DEFRA simply explained the minimum amount of life insurance that had to be attached to the insurance contract, so to speak, so that it would not violate these tax-free sections of the code, because if you violated TEFRA and DEFRA, then it would move over to a taxable section of the code, like an investment. These are tax-free. And so you had to have a commensurate amount of insurance coming along for the ride. But at age 60, if a 60-year-old had $500,000 they wanted to optimize to use as a living benefit, and they wanted to put in $500,000, and I had many clients that did back then, they could withdraw $50,000 a year, 10% a year, and it was tax-free. Now, you could buy a ton of life insurance for $500,000. That's not the objective. You wanted the least amount of insurance the IRS would let you get away with, and put in the most money the IRS allows. So let's say it was $500,000. There's nothing magic about that number, but I had many clients who put in $500,000 and immediately started pulling out $50,000 a year tax-free without depleting principal. It was incredible. And when TEFRA and DEFRA were passed, the minimum death benefit, let's say if you were 60, was 2.5 times that. So you had to have $1,250,000 of life insurance in order to be able to sock away $500,000 and have it grow at a net return of 10 if you were earning 11, and have it be tax-free, okay? Well, there was a massive exodus of money leaving the banks and the brokerage firms into these, because they're safer, they pay higher interest, they're tax-free, and they blossom when you die. There's not a bank around that does that with your money. And so the banks and credit unions wanted to slow the flow. They couldn't compete. But they didn't want to kill these, because this is where they put a lot of your money that you deposit in the bank. Did you know that? They pay you a measly 1% right now as of the recording of this episode, and they turn around and put it into insurance companies earning 5. They make $50,000 on every million they put in insurance companies. They only have to pay $10,000 to you to use OPM, other people's money. And so you can bypass the middleman. So TEFRA and DEFRA said you had to have a certain amount of insurance, but they gave parity. The older you were, the less you had to have to require, because you could be 80 years old and earn 11 and net 10, just like a 22-year-old athletic marathon running female. So it gave parity. It doesn't matter how old you were, and if you structured it correctly, the insurance got cheaper as you got older. If you've never seen an insurance policy that gets cheaper as you get older, you haven't seen one of these. TAMRA said, oh, you have to slow the flow, okay? So TEFRA and DEFRA have to do with the amount of insurance that has to be attached. TAMRA has to do with how fast you can fund it after June 21st, 1988. I compare this metaphorically to a bucket. So let's say an IUL policy is like a bucket. You're designing this to accommodate the amount of money you want to put in there. And I've been using $500,000, but let's say you're a male age 60 and you want to put in $100,000. Now, you can't put in more than that in the first 11 years under TEFRA and DEFRA, which are these tax citations. But you put in $100,000 over 4 years and 1 day. You could put in $20,000 the first day of the first year, first day of the second year, another 20. And after 4 years and 1 day, you can put in the last $20,000. So what ends up happening is you're filling up your insurance policy to comply with TAMRA. This helped the banks not see all the money leave them all at once to go into these, and so they were trying to slow the flow. But they didn't want to kill this, because this is where they put a lot of their money. The minimum death benefit, again, for a 60-year-old is about 2.5 times that. As you put this money in, this qualifies as part of that. So pretty soon, if this $100,000 doubles, like mine has every 7.5 years on the average, earning 9.6, when that doubles to $200,000, the only amount of insurance they're charging me for is the remaining $50,000. When 200,000 doubles to 400,000, now it pushes this ahead, and the insurance is costing less than 1/20th what it did when I started. This gets cheaper as you get older. But it's actually, this spigot, which is the cost of the insurance, is watering a nice little money tree at the end of the day that when you die, it's going to blossom and transfer tax-free. So that is how max-funded IUL works. Now, in 1997, indexed universal life was introduced because interest rates came down. This is where, let's say you have $1 million of cash value. It doesn't matter if you have 100,000, 10 million, you can extrapolate from this. But if I have $1 million of cash value at a given point in time, the general account portfolio rate, with interest rates being low the last decade or so, let's say is 4 or 5%. If they're earning on their general account portfolio, this is on mortgages on skyscrapers and shopping malls or on AAA and AA bonds, if they're earning 5%, they need about 1 of those percentage points for them. They're in business to make a profit, but they'll pay you the net of 4. That's 40,000. You can settle for that if you want, but if you feel bullish about America, like, well, I think the economy is going to be higher, grow more than 4%, you can relinquish the interest on your million, but your million is still safe in the insurance company earning 4. You're just saying you can take the interest on my million and buy options in an index that I choose, that you offer. Most of these insurance companies offer like the S&P or the Dow Jones or the Russell 2000. You can diversify, but that funds an options budget. They buy upside options in the S&P. And then if the S&P goes up 8%, the options allow them to pay you 80,000. If it's 12%, they pay 120,000, maybe up to a cap, okay? But you won't lose if you guess wrong and the economy crashes and it drops down 30%. You still have your million. You didn't lose 1 dime of your principal. That's the beauty of indexing. You benefit when the market goes up, but if the market crashes, you don't lose the money you started with that year. You only relinquish the interest on your money that year. Okay, so what does this mean? People say, well, Doug, I don't like all my eggs in one basket. I'm going, oh, you want to diversify, right? Why do you want to diversify into inferior investments? Well, what do you mean? Well, where are you going to diversify? Well, I'm going to put some money in the bank. Why? This is where the bank is putting your money. Some of your money, okay? Well, I want to earn, a safe return over at a credit union at 1%. Inflation's at 15. You're going backwards. Here's how smart people diversify in superior investments. So this is where people can diversify between 3 different index accounts. This is a statement. You can't see this. I'm going to read it. This year, they divided up $6,100 and they got 9% on a portion. $6,300 got 12%. Another $6,100 got 7.25%. And this $18,000 got credited 61.33%. They actually diversified in 4 different indices. You can do that. That is superior diversification by diversifying between different indices. But let me show you how many times people, they start out with 872,000, this client in 2020, March of 2020, when the market dropped 30%. And my son said, hey, link to a no cap, 1 year point to point. And they got 61.33% on 872,000. What was that? 535,000, tax-free. They ended up 1 year later with not just 872, but 1,387,000. And if the market were to crash the next year, they would not lose 1 dime of the $500,000 they made the year before. That's called lock-in and reset. So when you use multipliers, this is going to blow you away. If you let them take the interest on that million, remember that was 4%, that's 40,000 to fund an options budget. That means if you guess wrong and the market drops, you didn't make anything, but you didn't lose anything. You still have your million. But if you're pretty sure the market will likely head up, you can use a multiplier with some companies. So this is what the company will do. They'll say, well, if you want, you can, for a 7.5% fee. 7.5% on $1 million is how much? 75,000. what they're going to do with that is they're going to take 75,000 out of the million and fund a bigger options budget on top of the 4%. If you do that, you're capping your loss. So if the market lost 30 or 40%, the most you're going to lose is 7.5% on your million. But if the market goes up, the insurance company has more to pay you. And so they'll pay you 2.7 times, that's called a multiplier, whatever the S&P did or the indices that you chose. So let's say you earn 10%, they're going to pay you 2.7 times that, or 27%. They're going to subtract 7.5 from that, and you earn 19.5% that year. Does that make sense? That's pretty good. Well, based upon what I just showed you, our clients who linked and multiplied, instead of getting $500,000, okay, instead of getting 61%, they got 2.7 times that, subtract 7.5, they got credited 153% return in 1 year, tax-free. Now, what if you don't want to risk 7.5% of your principal? You can say, well, I'm willing to risk 5%, 50,000 on my million. They'll pay you 2.14 and they'll subtract 5%. These are called multipliers. I can probably tell you've got this deer in the headlight look right now, and you have no idea how powerful this is, but if you don't learn it, you're going to be left in the dust. So here's what I want you to do. Claim a free copy of my most recent best-selling book to learn about this. It's called The LASERFund. It is how to diversify and create the foundation for a tax-free retirement using my favorite vehicle, a max-funded IUL, structured correctly and funded properly. Therefore, it qualifies as a laser fund, liquid asset safely earning returns. In here, there are actually 2 books. This one is 14 chapters, about 200 pages with all the charts and graphs and explanations if you're a left brain thinker. If you're a right brain thinker, then you flip it over and you read this side, 100 pages, 12 chapters with 62 actual client stories. If you want to use both the right and left brain, okay, your whole brain, read both. But claim your free copy. You simply go to laserfund.com, LASERfund.com, click on the link below. You contribute a nominal amount towards the shipping and handling. I'll cover the rest of that cost, and I'll pay for the book. I'll fire out a hard copy to you. If you would like a digital version, or you like to listen and learn or watch and learn, there's even an 18-hour masterclass that goes way deeper than the book that my 2 sons who co-authored the book with me, we teach for 18 hours. While you're in there, check out the options to learn from our virtual webinars and seminars, online, Retire by Design, because this is about your brighter future and not outliving your money so that you can seize the opportunities to earn 10% tax-free, but some years as high as 61%, maybe 153%, like many people did in the year 2021 that owned laser funds.